Welcome to FiST Chat, your source for news and discussions in film science and technology, hosted by Steve Kern and Ben Warner. Visit our website at fistchat.com. Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, your source for news and discussions on film science and technology topics. My name's Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern for our second episode on this fine Australian Day weekend. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks Ben. Hi FiST Chat fans, good to see you all out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to the first episode we did today, which of course you would have heard last week, depending on when this one gets released, was a science topic, and we're going to continue a bit more of a science discussion in this episode with an article that we saw on Ars Technica about an insider story of the global attack on climate science. And this kind of puts a different perspective on the climate change debate, which we've discussed before, in the sense that there was a story in New Zealand where what happened here? A scientist was working on recording weather, recording temperatures over a century in terms of whether there was any difference in terms of the weather going up over, in terms of trend. And at a certain point, I believe he recalibrated his machine in 2008, and then it showed that there was a 0.91 degrees centigrade increase in overall warming from 1909 to 2008. And then apparently there were a certain groups that came in and were trying to show that maybe he'd done something shonky with the recalibration of the machine, and that somehow, there was a conspiracy afoot, by the lefties, so to speak, in New Zealand to kind of blow up the whole climate change thing as being, sort of a real problem when they thought it was all nonsense. What was probably interesting, I thought, in this story was he put it in a different perspective. It wasn't just that, he's talking about the New Zealand, I think it's the Climate Science Coalition that went after him and were using parliamentarians to, support their cause, so to speak. But the interesting thing I thought here was that he was talking about it in court terms where, it all went to court. They ended up settling, and it turned out, these guys that were kicking up a stink about his supposed research ended up, I guess, not coming out very well on the other end of the argument. Yeah. But the probably worst thing about it was that they went into liquidation and then put the bill for all of the legal costs for an argument that didn't go anywhere onto the taxpayer. And
if you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. But, is this another example of, that sort of ideological war kind of thing that's happening with this climate change debate? Because, there's so much of that sort of getting infused into the argument where really it should be just about, all right, here's the science, this is what it's saying, and, shouldn't it be as straightforward as that rather than all this sort of stuff happening? Yeah,
it's a very interesting situation, and I'm not talking about the debate because there is no debate. And it's ridiculous that people, rail against climate change science. Can understand if you don't like government policy on climate change. Can understand if you don't want to pay a tax. Can understand if you think that they're implementing the wrong ways of dealing with climate change. But, there is no doubt we're changing the climate. We're pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's incontrovertible. We are. That will change our environment. Now, I can't speak for the statistics and, as I say, for the political side. I don't know why it can be so politicised. If people did this with economists and economic theory, if they carried on like this, then, maybe I'd understand it, but they don't. And economists get it wrong all the time. The science is for climate science is pretty much spot on, and it's pretty much agreed with. The little bits that aren't agreed with are highlighted as huge differences amongst the scientific community. They're not. So really this whole argument is just perverse. And I just think that it's something that, because people know so little about, like most people get onto talkback radio or any other, popular, redneck style topic, people just love a good fight over it. And because we're not going to all boil to death tomorrow, it's great. It can keep on going.
Well, it's like a sort of knee-jerk reaction to a change to the status quo. We can't. Obviously, the people who are sort of putting up the most doubt mongering of this type, that are trying to make it as if there isn't a problem, don't want their setup to change because it's been working so well for such a long time. But there's an example again in this article where they're saying doubt mongering is an old strategy. It's a strategy that's been pursued before to combat ideas, for example, that cigarette smoking is harmful to your health.
Exactly.
And we know how that all turned out. But another point that they make in this article is that took a long time to sort of go through the system, and it's sort of generally accepted now that smoking is not good for you. And in fact, there's almost a stigma attached to smoking these days.
Well, yeah, having said that, governments around the world have literally spent billions of dollars to change those attitudes. Yeah. Same as they have, for instance, with road laws, road safety laws, etc., etc. As I keep saying, I've got no problem if people think that, government policy is either wrong on climate change, or alternatively, if anyone actually thinks that government policy is going to save us, that's equally as wrong. Turn off your devices and stop using fossil fuels as an individual, and you might be able to save the planet. This idea that we have to somehow regulate it, or that it should be a political issue, just, I think, overshoots the mark to some extent. But it is, as you say, it's very interesting how the merchants of doubt work in these instances. And there are vested interests, and I don't think we need to get conspiracy theory about it, but, there's vested interest in it. And I guess these groups then prey on people who just have loud mouths and big opinions just to start a fight, and in that fight stops any progress at all. Yeah. So, sure, we'll catch up, and I'm sure, we'll take some sort of action as a society, sometime in the future. But, by then, obviously, well, they're already saying now it's probably too late. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the world then.
No, exactly. It just might be some adjustments that we'll need to get used to. That's all. But is the this climate change issue is it more harder to pin down, say, as what cigarette smoking is in terms of damage to your health? And in that sense, is it harder for, say, a government to try and sell the line that that we have to do something about it? It's harder to pin down in terms of a public message.
Well, there's some great stats about cigarette smoking, for instance. So, cigarette smoking only causes, only 2% of people die because of cigarette smoking. Now, that statistic sounds ridiculous, but it's actually true. However, while it's only 2%, all the other diseases that arise out of cigarette smoking, however, aren't directly linked, like various, things such as cardiovascular disease, although they're linking them now. But that was the original quote. And, you can say it's not dangerous. You can twist statistics. And it's very interesting, the same people that say for climate science that the statistics are twisted by the scientists to show climate change, use twisted statistics to claim otherwise. Yeah. So it's a pointless debate. I don't really have any time for it either way. I just think that if it's only when society is truly serious about, doing something about it that something will happen. So if people don't care, there's no point in, caring about climate change and driving your diesel tractor to the shops.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we might move on, but I just wanted to point out too that we just hope that, there isn't a lot of more wastage in terms of time and resources when, this sort of argument happens. As an example, in that story, there was that court case that went nowhere, and all this money was wasted, time was wasted, and it didn't really achieve anything. And
it's become an industry now. You can get yourself a job in the media simply with an opinion.
Yep.
On climate change.
And in some cases you can get your own TV show on Sunday morning on network TV.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter which side of the debate you're on. This is the whole point. It doesn't matter actually which side of the debate you're on. What I find a little bit disturbing though is that, scientists specifically are targeted as if they're up to something, and it's just kind of like, really? I mean, the American military, is already drawing up plans because they know the Arctic ice cap will melt within a decade, and they want to secure shipping lines. Now, if it's good enough for the US military to believe in climate change, it's good enough for me, unless you're some sort of like leftist crazy loon that thinks that climate change is leftist crazy loon.
Yeah. Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense, Ben.
No, well, let's hope some sanity comes to it at some point.
Exactly.
All right, we'll move on to our news bites now. We spoke about Google Glass just recently, but we've got another story which I think is a bit more amusing from the Sydney Morning Herald. If you wear Google Glass to the movies, the FBI might come after you. Now, to cut a long story short, a man went into a cinema wearing Google Glass and was trying to watch the new movie Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit in peace, but the FBI before the FBI got there, I should say, the manager of the theater thought there was something dodgy going on, that he was recording the movie with his Google Glass. The FBI showed up, arrested him, and it took them an hour apparently for the feds to figure out that they could resolve the issue just by checking if there was any data on the Google Glass that showed that he'd recorded anything. So I just thought this was funny. I mean, they want you to turn your mobile phones off. Are they going to have the ads at the front? Please switch your Google Glass off now and put your 3D glasses on.
Would it have been too much for the guy to take his Google Glass off?
Yeah, that's another good question.
I reckon if he got tasered, he would have deserved it. Well, come on,
Yeah.
Are they optic? I doubt they're prescription Google Glass.
Yep.
So take them off in the cinema, buddy, because he mightn't have been recording the film, but I reckon that someone else might have been. So was it reasonable for the cinema people to think that? Probably. Was it reasonable for the FBI to get involved? It's a federal offence.
Yep, that's right. But I'm sure they might have other things that might need their attention too.
Take your Google Glass off when you go to the cinema.
No, exactly.
I think don't come out afterwards and say you were traumatised from talking to the FBI. That's ridiculous.
Exactly. All right, our science news bite from the ABC. Turkey skin inspires chemical sensor. The flappy skin on the turkey's face and throat could help save human lives in a terror attack or chemical spill. It's the waddle of the throat shows agitation or excitement by changing from red to blue or blue to white, and scientists have figured out that they could potentially use this to perhaps set off early warnings of any issues and such. And I think this is a good example. We had the jellyfish the other week about nature inspiring science, and this seems to be another really good example of it.
This is brilliant. Like, this is another area of applied science that's right outside of the box. So what would, if you were just doing science on the turkey waddle, everyone would go, well, why should we know how it works? Who cares? We only eat turkeys.
Yeah.
Now, one of the greatest problems we have with chemical sensing, particularly by machines, is that they're not very good at telling us. You can't just have a light that comes on a machine because it doesn't give you enough information. Yeah. Here's an example of applying science that would have been pure science to look into the turkey waddle, how it works, and thinking, wow, we can actually use that as a chemical sensor that will show, far better than any machine can.
Yeah.
It's a biosensor which gives you visual feedback that you don't need to analyse. There's no numbers. There's no software involved. You will be able to see with your own eyes if there's a threat. I think that's brilliant science.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, our tech news bite from appadvice.com. Could Nintendo finally be considering a move to the App Store? And I can't say that I'd be not buying some of their apps if they happen to port them to iOS or Android. I wasted.
Why is it taking them so long? Would be my question.
I wasted many hours in my youth playing Super Mario and whatnot. But and if they manage to put any of those games onto iOS and Android, they're going to make an absolute killing. Unfortunately, as this article points out, that could be to the detriment to their own hardware business. But as it stands, they're losing money, and they may not have a choice. They may have to rely on their sort of iconic back catalogue to keep afloat.
Well, let's face it. Why does anyone need to buy hardware anymore. You know, if you look at the Xbox and the PlayStation, they've given very strong reasons. Nintendo was always only about the games.
Yeah.
Only ever about the games, and they're all self-contained games. They're not much broader in that sort of appeal. So I think, unfortunately, they have to do it.
Well, I mean, especially if they release all these games, say, across all platforms, so, you know, you could play it on your Xbox just as easily as you could play it on your iPhone or whatever. They could make billions out of that.
Well, Nintendo have a reputation as one of the best game producers. I mean, that is really what their forte is. So let us play games, Nintendo. Let us play on any platform, because, you know, that's why we've loved you for so long, for 30 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there. So thanks again, Steve, for the chat.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, FiST Chat fans. Who else is a Nintendo fan out there? There must be lots of you.
We want to know. So don't forget our website, FiSTchat.com. You can get all of our links and content there. Our ebook, The FiST Report, is available at FiSTReport.com. So we've just got our new edition out now for 2013. The old version's there as well. And if you think anyone would be interested in our weekly discussions on film science and technology, then feel free to send them to our website. We'd greatly appreciate that. So that's it for this episode. So we'll catch you next time.